What's up, Jet fans? With the season almost upon us, I'm going to go through the Jets games and try to predict their win-loss record. So, the very first game is against the Ravens in New York, and unfortunately, I'm going to say the Jets lose their first game. They might not have Zach Wilson, and the Ravens, they're going to be healthy. Last year, they were a good team, it's just they had a bunch of injuries. So this year they're going to be a lot better, and unfortunately the Jets are going to lose week 1. Then the next game is against the Browns without Deshaun Watson, which is a big help for the Jets, and so I'm going to say the Jets actually beat the Browns. They don't have a good quarterback yet, and the Jets are going to be able to beat the Browns and go 1-1. And then week 3 against the Bengals, while yes, the Jets did beat them last year in a crazy game by Mike White, unfortunately, they're not going to be able to beat them this year. That was a fluke game. The Bengals just made it to the Super Bowl, and they're going to lose to the Jets. Then game number 4 is against the Steelers. It's in Pittsburgh, but the Jets should be able to beat the Steelers. They're not the Steelers of old. They don't have Ben Roethlisberger, who really hasn't been that well either in his last few years. But it's either going to be Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, and so I think the Jets will be able to beat the Steelers due to the Steelers quarterback situation. Then the next game, it's in New York against the Dolphins, and so I think the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Patriots are all pretty similar strength-wise. But since it's in New York and they have the home field advantage, I'm going to say the Jets beat the Dolphins. And so this is actually big news for the Jets if it happens the way I'm thinking, because that means the Jets will have a 3-2 record at this point, which is their first winning record in who the hell knows how long. But so that's big news for the Jets. Unfortunately, then they play the Packers. I know the Packers lost Davante Adams, but it's still Aaron Rodgers, back-to-back MVP. They're going to lose to the Packers. So they're going to go 3-3, which is still 500. And I think if you've been following the Jets recently, you would take that. The next game, game number 7, it's against the Broncos. This one's interesting. The Broncos have Russell Wilson now. And so if it was earlier on in this season and Russell Wilson maybe was still trying to get used to that offense, I could see the Jets beating them. But since it's mid-season, I think unfortunately the Jets are going to lose to the Broncos. Then the next game is in New York against the Patriots, and like I said with the Dolphins, I think they're all pretty similar. It is still Bill Belichick, but he lost a couple of guys, all his free agent acquisitions from last year. Some of them don't seem to really be paying off, and so since it's in New York, I'm going to say the Jets actually win. And then the next week is against the Buffalo Bills. The Jets are going to lose, even though it's in New York. The Bills are just such a better team. They're trying to make a Super Bowl run, and if they don't win the AFC East, something really bad has happened for the Bills, or something really weird has happened for one of the other teams. Then the game after that is the Patriots again, and like I said before, since they're so similar, I'm just going to give it to the home field advantage, which this week is the Patriots. So I'm going to say the Patriots beat the Jets. And so right now they're 4-6, which once again for the Jets is not terrible. And next up they play the Bears, which I think they will win, going 5-6 at this point. The Bears, Justin Fields, is he the real deal? We don't really know yet. By this point in the season we might know, but looking at it from here, I don't think he is. And I just don't think they have the talent. I think the Jets are more talented with their amazing offseason. So I think the Jets will beat the Bears. And then the next week, they play the Vikings. Unfortunately, I'm going to say the Jets lose. It's in Minnesota. And I think on paper anyways, and I know we've been saying this for quite a few seasons, but on paper, the Vikings is a super talented team. They have a new head coach, which lots of people say their old head coach was the problem. So maybe that they got rid of him, they might be a much better team. So I'm going to say the Jets lose to the Vikings. And then they play the Bills again, which also I believe is a loss, unfortunately. So they will be going 5-8 at this point. The Bills are going to sweep the Jets. But then next week is against the Lions, and here we have a stretch of winnable games. And so against the Lions, I think the Jets should be able to beat them. The Jets had a far better offseason. The Lions were a worse team last year. And the Jets had a better offseason than them. So I think the Jets should be able to beat them going 6-8. And then against the Jaguars, I think last year Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson were in pretty similar situations, being on really bad teams. But I think the Jets did a far better job surrounding him with talent versus Trevor Lawrence, who I think they overpaid for a bunch of mid-level guys. And I know they got rid of their coach, but I just think the Jets in New York should be able to beat the Jaguars going 7-8. And then they play the Seahawks in Seattle, and I also think the Jets should be able to win this game. The Seahawks, who are they going to start? Geno Smith, the Jets' old friend, or Drew Lock? And even with that, there's not a lot of talent around them. And so I just think the Jets should be able to beat whoever they start. It'd be a good job to get a win over Jamal Adams after that whole saga. And I just think the Seahawks are tanking. And then the last week, so at this point they're 8-8. And the last week, if they beat the Dolphins in Miami, they'd go 9-8. Unfortunately, I think the Jets and the Dolphins are pretty similar, and so I'm gonna say that the Dolphins beat them since they have home field advantage, going 8-9, which is really tough. They almost have a winning record, but I don't think they achieve it this year. Anyways, looking at it now, just looking at their season going 8-9 and being competitive, especially at the end of the season where they have, I would say, 4 easy games at the end of the season, they should be able to be competitive, maybe make a playoff run, but probably not get it. But an 8-9 record, I think, would show that their offseason that's getting all this talk is the real deal, and they're actually an improving team surrounding Zach Wilson with weapons. And I think any Jets fan after the past couple of seasons would be extremely happy with an 8-9 record. And if they win a couple of games, they won a bunch of fluke games last year. So if they win some fluke games, maybe they beat the Bengals again, which would be crazy. Maybe they can sweep either the Dolphins or the Patriots. Now you're looking at a 9-8 or 10-7 record, which could be good enough to make the playoffs. I don't think that's really realistic, but crazier things have happened in the NFL. Anyways, that's just my predictions. My final prediction is an 8-9 record, super close to a winning record, but not there yet. Thanks so much for listening.